Well, welcome everybody to Prime Time for Women's Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom. I'm so excited that you could be here with us this evening as we welcome Kathleen Rehl and Lori Yata to today's program. Kathleen is a certified financial planner who has tons of experience and has been seen on many programs, including the Wall Street Journal. She's written for New York Times, the CNBC, USA Today, and other publications. She's the author of an award-winning book, Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guide for widows. The best part about her book is it's not just a financial guide, it's an emotional guide. As a widow herself, she really can help you travel that emotional journey. Oh, my kids are texting me about the new grandbaby. I'm going to silence that. So Kathleen, we're so glad you're here. And before we hear from Kathleen, I am pleased to welcome and introduce Lori Yata. She is co-owner of the Stone House Urban Winery in Hagerstown. I love that your website says you are two women in historic Hagerstown making a difference in the world of wine and cider. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit of your history and how it came to be.
Well, it was an interesting end to the beginning of my new part of my life. I was going through a really ugly divorce, 35 years of marriage. And I remember going to the lawyer and then not wanting to go home. Because I knew he was there and I knew what was going on. I'd be a little quiet because the girls are downstairs. So anyways, I stopped into the only winery and I was sitting at the bar having a glass of wine, never been there before. And I saw a sign off to the side saying, help wanted. Hadn't worked in 25 years, moved 15 times. I didn't need to work, but I took care of, the last house had 4 acres. It was 4,000 square feet. And I thought, okay, I said, I'm watching my granddaughters. I can only work Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. And they went, really? That's when you can work? I said, yeah. So they hired me on as a server. I had never been a server in my life. I was one of the timid ones. I didn't know how these young'uns make tips, but I figured it out quick. I served for 2 years watching my granddaughters. And then the boss came up to me, or the manager, and said, hey, Lori, we like the way you think. We like the way you interact with people. Would you like to become the events and marketing person? Never had a clue. I had 2 years of college. I went, okay.
So why not? Let me just say, the reason I asked Lori to be on the program is she is like a poster child for Prime Time for Women. New adventures, new phase of life, nothing and nobody can tell her she can't do it. So we're so proud of you.
I'm going to show you my wine. This is my wine. It's called Lost My Marbles.
Yeah. Love it.
Fine. So, after 4 years, the other Lori, so the other owner is Lori Dixon, and she bought it was called the only winery at Stonehouse Square. She bought into the business, probably, it was 5 years when I got involved. And she kept coming in. Within 2 weeks of getting into the business, opening up this winery, her mother passed. And her mother and Lori never got married. Her mother and she were best friends. And when her mother passed, Lori just took a nosedive. So she kept coming into the only winery and talking to me. And my sister hired me a life coach that got me through some hard times. And I said to him, hey, Marty, she's ready to call bankruptcy. I said, is this something that maybe I can get into and help her out? And Larry, let me see. I'm going to, talk to her. So I literally had to lie to her to call him because she was very proud. And she called him took him on board to help her turn this business around. And after about a year, he said, all right, Lori, to me, funny thing is, I'm Lori, she's Lori, his girlfriend is Lori.
Oh my.
His two previous wives were Lori, and one of our new investors is Lori. So we all got,
Is this karma or what?
I don't know. So he said, Lori, I think, you would be really good running the front of the house. I do a cupcake and wine stroll that for the only winery was our best.
How long have you been now a partner with?
I have been with, okay, so at 3 years, Marty said to the other Lori, you cannot make money selling their wine. So they were using the same winemaker. She would buy the wine from them and then try to sell it. So 3 years ago, when I got into the business to run the front of the house, her job was to make wine, period. She was an X-ray technician, retired. She is now 65 years old. And she said, okay, so she started making the wine.
That's great.
It was a little hard because after being, on my own for 4 years and her being on her own for, most of her life, we had to try to figure out how to stay in each other's lanes. And there were a few, poor Marty, I thought he was going to quit several times because we had some really rough times. But once she moved into where she needed to go, and I was allowed to take over her baby, because that's all she knew.
Right.
We started to mesh. So,
and how long ago was that?
She sold her house, I would say probably 2.5 years ago. She sold her house in Rockville area, moved up to Hagerstown, got an apartment, and we each had our own place.
Right. So fast forward to now, this is so exciting. During COVID, you all saw an incredible growth in your business.
It was crazy.
Can you talk about that?
So when I started, my other boxer had died and I had to keep leaving soda. He was
That's your boxer.
9 years old at home when I was working at the only winery. So when I bought into this business, I thought, you know what, I'm bringing my dog. So we drive 50 minutes from Damascus to Hagerstown 5 days a week. I brought him in there, and at first, I was tying him up so that he wouldn't get into people's way. And all of a sudden people were coming up to talk to him. So when COVID hit, I said to my daughter-in-law, I said, Maggie, Soda is so sad. He's not seeing his guests. And she said, well, can't you have him deliver wine? I said, oh, okay. So I bought a little saddle bag that a service dog uses. You can put a wine bottle on each side. And it was hysterical the first time we did it. I had one of my regulars at the top of the walk. And I opened up the door and she called him and he started up the walk and he got to the top. And all of a sudden, she was getting her bottles out, but he heard something, a squirrel or some robin behind him, and he spun around and she's chasing him going, hey, give me my wine.
Well, I love that story because to me, it was good for you. It was good for your dog. It was social distancing. It made the people who were picking up the wines, it gave them a laugh, and it actually went viral. Isn't that?
It went viral.
Right.
We have a veteran, World War II veteran, that made his son drive from Virginia 3 times so he could come and have soda delivered.
Oh.
We had celebrated Soda's birthday in December, and we donated a proceed of all our bottle sales to the Humane Society. And then another person at the Humane Society, an anonymous woman, matched every sale. So he earned them over $1,000.
That's good.
Which we presented them a check. So, and the last, and I'll quit with soda, but he's right here with me. The last was 2 weeks ago. One of my servers wanted to learn Spanish 101. all of a sudden she goes on learning Spanish, and here's a cartoon from Portugal. And he's going to teach you how to speak Spanish, like speaking, not talking, and all of a sudden there's a picture of soda with his wine delivery bags. And so he showed us, he said, and the only word I understood 3 times was loco. He called us loco. He had me getting the wine, he had soda going up and delivering. I mean, it was hysterical. All I could do is laugh.
Oh, that's great.
So it's been an adventure because of her and my the other Lori and my craziness. We make chocolate covered strawberry wine, s'mores wine, strawberry shortcake wine. We're just kind of like, what the heck? Let's go for it. And the bottles, we sold like 178 bottles in less than 2 hours.
Yeah, so I love your creativity, and I think it's kind of speaks to where you are in life. You've kind of done so many things. You're not afraid to try anything.
No.
And I think that one of the things when I started Women in Their Prime Time for Women, part of what I really enjoy about this phase of life, I think women in their prime are more likely to regret not trying something than they are fearful of trying something new. It's like, I'm going to try it because I don't want to regret not trying it.
Absolutely.
Well, Lori, I'm so glad you shared those stories with us, but I was wondering if you have a wine that you want to recommend to us tonight.
Oh, you know what? We are known for our fruit wines.
Okay.
So we have a peach Chardonnay that is definitely has a peach infusion, but it finishes with a buttery note because it's a Chardonnay grape.
Right.
Our Blackberry Merlot's got a bit of a dry finish, but you're going to get that blackberry in it. If you want to just come to the Stonehouse in the summertime, we are known for our slushies. And this coming Saturday, I'm going to be bringing up our orange creamsicle slushie. And they are to die for.
Okay, and give me your website so I can put it in the chat here.
Okay, it's StonehouseUW.com.
UW.
Or you can just Google wine delivery dog and you'll get to his page and it'll direct you to us.
Well, Lori, I am so grateful that you were here and able to join us. I can't wait to try that peach Chardonnay myself. I am not I'm not hugely knowledgeable about wine, but I've been learning a lot about it through this program. So, and you're not far from me, so I can definitely stop by. And,
then you will like our fruit wines.
Okay, I will. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm happy to have you stay if you can have time. But I know that you have some family obligations. So before I introduce Kathleen further, I wanted to check in with our guests and see if anybody has a question for Lori. You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat box. Either Cynthia or Lois or Kathleen.
I used to live up in that area many, many years ago. I was a professor at Hood College and got up to Hagerstown sometime, but that was way before this era. But where are you located in Hagerstown?
Okay, so do you know where the Shank Farm is?
I don't, it's been so many years since I was
It's
there.
the north end of Hagerstown.
Yeah, it's where the Lowe's is. I'm
Long Meadow Shopping Center.
Damascus, but we are in the old Shank Farm. The house has been there since 1755. So it used to be all their land. Now they put in a Lowe's. There's a Friendly's. So we're our own little standing tasting room now. We don't grow our own grapes, but we do make our own wine.
Okay.
And one of the things I like about it is it's a little bit of history. It's kind of an oxymoron with all the other new development right around it. So, but it's a beautiful facility. So
it is. It's gorgeous. We have our own ghost. You know, he messes with us all the time. So.
Well, okay, Cynthia or Lois, if you have questions, let us know. And if not, I'll move on with the next portion of tonight's program.
Thank you very much, Lori.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, if you can please send me the information on the book.
Okay.
That would be wonderful, because whether it's a death or a death of a marriage,
Right.
you know, you're still going through the same grieving pattern.
Yes, for sure. And this program will be on Primetime for Women's website, and you can check out Kathleen's whole presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for
I can hear they're starting to get restless out there. The fight is about ready to start.
All right.
Take care. Nice to meet
Okay.
you.
Go, Grandma.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Kathleen, you share an unwanted identity with 11.5 million other American women. That is the identity of a widow. Unlike most of them, you are a financial planner, but you experienced an incredible grief and struggle with your finances, even though you had that knowledge, because you had to first deal with your grief. So in that process, you learned a lot, and you wrote a book called Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guidebook for widows. One of the things I wanted to say to you that I liked best about your writing is I wasn't sure if it was on your website or in an article that you wrote, but you said you want women to be able to move forward on their own, but not alone. And that sense of support and connection is so important to me. And I'm so glad that you really talk about the need to find that support and connection. So I want to open this up to you, and I know you have a lovely presentation, and I'll invite you to do that. But first, I just wanted to get a little sense of where you are today as a woman in her prime who has had this whole big career and now another career. How would you describe yourself? What 3 words would you use to describe yourself today?
3 words. Oh my. Well, I'm definitely refired, not retired. I'm happy, and I am at a very, very good place. Now that's more than just 3 words, but
that's good.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. It's an interesting place to be. I'm in my 75th year right now, and as you said, I've traveled through many careers. Started out in the educational, well, I'm still in the educational realm, but in public schools, and then I got my Ph.D. and went on to
taught at college, right?
Yep, college. In fact, for my part of those years, I was teaching at Hood College. I also taught at University of Nebraska. And then I decided to transition into the nonprofit sector. My colleagues thought I was nuts leaving the ivory tower after I got tenure, because nobody did that. But I entered the nonprofit sector for 12 years. I was there and worked for a national healthcare agency that was in Washington, D.C., and then for a social service agency, in Ohio. And that's where I really cut my teeth on this financial stuff. And I was working to raise awareness and raise money for these nonprofits. So I was talking to donors and working with their financial planners, with their attorneys, with their insurance agents, with their CPAs. And I decided, I really need to learn more about this stuff. I think I'm going to get certified as a financial advisor, because then I can talk the language. So I went back to school again. My husband thought I was crazy. He said, "You've got enough degrees already." I said, "Well, it's either this or it's a law school degree."
Yeah, right.
So we're gonna do it this way. And got that training. But then I decided, I want to sit on the same side of the table as my clients, because they had a lot of charitable interests. They were interested in their college where they went to school, or their church, or the symphony, or the Cancer Institute, or many, many things. They didn't want just me to bring all their dollars in one place. So I opened my shop, became a financial advisor, did that for almost 18 years. And by that time, my late husband had passed, and I'd written the book, and I was doing more speaking and teaching, traveling around talking about that. And a very dear friend of mine, a colleague, said, Kathleen, you're going to burn yourself out. You can't do both the speaking and teaching and running around and work with your clients at the same time. So you got to make a decision. So just like Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, I decided I'm going to go the speaking, teaching, research, mentoring route, because I can have a greater impact. Because if I'm in front of an audience, and many times the audience that I was speaking at, there would be 100 people there working with widows.
You're speaking not necessarily directly to widows, but also to other financial planners, right?
Yes, I had two different audiences. I was working with, like today, we're talking with people who have gone through widowhood, or they're thinking someday they might go through widowhood, or they've got a friend who's got a widow. And guess what? That's just about all of us. In fact,
Everybody, right.
This morning, my nephew-in-law died and of COVID. And there are an extremely large number of COVID deaths that are happening that are leaving lots of widows this particular year. But anyway, so I decided to go the speaking teaching route because I could impact more. And I did that for another 6 years. And then I decided, for a variety of reasons, and I was in my new marriage, and I didn't want to do as much traveling. So I decided to close down that career. And what I'm doing now in retirement is a lot with legacy work, and we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But
So,
I'm still doing some more teaching, but on a very limited scale.
So I wanted to ask you, did you read that book, Refire, Don't Retire?
Yes, and this was it was written back. I have to say it was in the late 80s, maybe the early 90s. I think it was in the 80s, and I picked up on that. And in my financial planning business, I worked with a lot of clergy. My late husband was a pastor, and it was a logical connection to work with clergy. There's some very different kinds of financial planning things that happen with clergy. So that book was being used with many of the clergy, because they were trying to encourage pastors, once they retired, not to just drop off the edge, but to do intra-ministry work, to continue to work. And I love that term, retirement. So I adapted it to my practice, but the financial planning world did not pick that term up.
Right.
So when I've talked about retirement a couple of years ago, and I was on my birthday 2 years ago that I was officially refired. And many of my colleagues said, oh, that's so clever that you thought of that word retirement. And I said, no, it's been around for a couple of decades, but just not used in the financial planning world. But I talked to all my clients about, you're not just going to retire and then go sit on the porch on a swing or golf all day long or enjoy fine dining. There's a lot more.
Well, and there's so much research that says that people who do refire, who stay engaged, who make these connections, it's not only physically beneficial, it is emotionally and spiritually beneficial. My favorite little piece of information is, according to the World Health Organization, women with strong social, not just women, people with strong social connections have a better, have greater longevity and also a higher life satisfaction score than people who don't. And also, social connections impact your health and well-being more than diet and exercise combined. And
yes.
When I read that, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely doing this prime time for women thing.
Yes, incentive. Yes, those relationships, and those are, when I look at like my 5 fundamentals of retirement, I call them my F words. Relationships, friendships is definitely one of those, and I work at that.
Yeah, I know. That's great. Hey, I know that you have a really nice PowerPoint that you were going to share with us, and I have some questions for you too, but I thought maybe we could start off with that PowerPoint because it captures the essence of your book and the reason behind your book so well.
Okay, yes, I made a little abbreviation of one. So if I just do, you've made me a co-presenter. So if I share screen,
We should be able to see it.
okay, share. Does that show up on yours?
Yes, it surely does.
Okay, so I'm going to just move this over here. All right. This opening slide, it's like widows are very much on the front now. I mentioned the COVID deaths. That's one thing that is happening out there, that a lot more widows are experiencing widowhood after the loss of their spouse. But in the media, you'll see if you Google widows, you'll see all kinds of stuff. So I was just looking at what's out there in films, and we've got a couple of them right now. Nomadland, which, by the way, just won another award this last weekend. Movies for Grown-Ups, PBS gave out the awards, and it won the Best Picture. Fern is the main character, Frances McDermott, which I
love
like her acting a lot. She is a widow. She and her husband, before he passed, lived in Nevada, and he worked in the zinc mine.
Is this Fern or the character?
Fern, the character.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, Fern, the character. Yes, thank you. And she did substitute teaching in that area, but the zinc mine closed down, and it was after his death, and so she didn't. There was really nothing that she could do there, and she didn't have a lot of money, and so she becomes a nomad. She has this van and she goes on the road, and it was based on the book Nomadland, which is a documentary. And I've never read the book, but the characters that are in the movie certainly make a point of it, of how she lives by going to work part-time jobs. Amazon is one of the jobs. She works in a beet factory in Nebraska. But very, very, very interesting movie. There's another movie that you might not be as familiar with. It's called Some Kind of Heaven. It's a documentary also, and it's about the Villages. Now, the Villages is the biggest retirement community in this country, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is too.
It's near Orlando, but this character Dennis, and he's not an actor. In fact, there are no actors at all in this movie. And by the way, with Nomadland, there were only 2 actors, Francis, and then there's one other character. Everybody else they were portraying themselves. But Dennis is a real character, and what he would do would be to get into a pool area, or one of there are 3 really communities, and he'd try to connect up with a widow and convince her that, oh, he could be her handyman, or he could do things. He lived out of a van also. It was a crummier van than what Fern had, but he was trying to mooch off of the single women, many of them who were widowed in that particular movie. But widows are out in the media, so you see them in the movie. Let me see if I can. There we go. Okay. We talked a bit about the statistics with the COVID. I'm going to ask you some questions, like true or false. And we can't see Cynthia or Lois, but if you
Jump in.
Yeah. There will soon be 13 million widows in the United States, with approximately 1 million added this year. Now, this is based on the most, we're talking about the most recent census, which there has been a recent census, but that we don't have that data yet. This is a few years.
Census, yeah.
A few years back.
I'm going to say true.
True. That is true. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say true also.
Yeah, you're right. It is true. All right. The average age a wife becomes a widow. You think it's 59, 65, or 71?
65.
I say 65 too.
It's actually 59.
Wow.
And when I do this, when I would give this quiz in a live audience, and I'd give that response, when I've got 100 people in the audience, there's typically a response like, they can't believe that it's many of them guess 65 or 71. It's actually 59. When I was widowed, I had just turned 60 years old. Half of the women over 65. How many more years do you think they're gonna, on average, live after that husband dies? How many years would you guess?
20.
20.
20. You're pretty close. It's 15.
Okay.
15 years. And you think of all the financial decisions that a widow has to make, let alone deal with the emotional issues. It's a very scary time for many widows. Right? True or false? 70% of baby boomer wives will outlive their husbands, and 80% of women will be single at death.
True.
True.
You're right. That is true.
That is a shocking statistic, I have to say.
Yep. And if a woman who's widowed remarries, there's a high probability that she's going to be widowed a second time. In fact, my new husband that I've been married to for 2 years now, and I'm actually older than he is.
Good for
I'm a
you.
whole lot, but I'm older. But I said, we were guessing how long we were going to live, and he said, I know you're going to live longer than I am. And I said, no, that's not the deal. When we got married, it was supposed to be you're going to live longer than me.
It's funny that you say that. My father-in-law had his first heart attack at 46 and had quadruple bypass surgery 2 different times. And just his father died at 38 of heart disease. And he just never believed he was going to outlive his wife. And I have to say, it's been very, very difficult for him because she passed away. And he's like, that wasn't the script. That's not how it was supposed to go. So and plus, because most of his male friends have died.
Yeah.
Quite lonely.
Yeah. I have another friend. It was actually a high school friend, and his wife was widowed. And he went back to our 50th high school class reunion, and one of the other gals was there who'd gone through a divorce, and they started having a conversation, and within a year, they got married. Well, just about 2 weeks ago, she died. So he's been widowed twice. That's an unusual statistic.
Yeah.
All right, on average, only what percentage of widows aged 55 to 64 remarry? Now this is the mature level woman. It's not the widow who was, she lost her husband when she was in her 20s and her 30s. This is widows who are older. So what percentage do you think remarry?
30.
I'm going to say 18.
It's actually 8.
8?
Oh,
8.
oh, wow, that was way
And
off.
then those of us who are the more elderly.
No, we like to say more prime.
Yes, more prime. I'm not going to say senior, more prime. What percent of us
Higher level.
remarry?
I think by the time you're 65, you're like, okay, I'm throwing caution to the wind. I'm going to say 20.
I don't know on that one. 2.
Oh, 2.
2%. And I was part of those. So I'm one of those 2%ers. For many years, I was never going to get married again. And that's the way a lot of boomer widows who have been married, have lost their spouse. Many of them feel that they don't want to remarry. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not living together. As one gal said, I don't care what my neighbor says, I'm just living together in sin. And so but for a variety of reasons, I decided that I did want to get remarried. All right. Conversely, a widower typically remarries within 2 or 3 years of his wife's death. And why do you think that is?
You want somebody to take care of them.
Yes. Men don't do as well by themselves as women do, I don't think.
Yeah, that's both of those things. And I have to tell you that I had an opportunity several times. I had several proposals along the way, and I said, no, I don't. And some of them, all the guys were older than me, and some of them had some physical challenges. And I said, yes, I took care of my husband, but I was with him for many years, but I was not going to take on a brand new relationship and be the nurse there.
So I want to say something about that. I think that men, when I say they want somebody to take care of them, I think men often rely on the social connections that women bring into their lives.
Yeah.
Men have not been encouraged
Yeah.
to maintain contact and connection over the course of life the way women have. I know many, many women who are still, they're 65 and 70, and they still can call their college roommate up and pick up right where they dropped off. Or they can call a colleague that they worked with 30 years ago. I don't, and I think in some ways that connection is a powerful incentive to men who don't have that. Women can enrich their lives not only by being the primary relationship, but by bringing other people into their lives. So I frequently speak when I speak. I tell the men it's important for them to get with the program and reach out and make connections, that it's good for them too.
You are so right about that. It's the wife that maintains like the social calendar. And he says, okay, it's going to be Jimmy. Jimmy's birthday is coming up, a grandson. What are we going to do for that? The holidays are, we haven't planned what we're going to do for the holidays. Are we going to have everybody here? Are we going to have dinner here? Whatever that's going to be. It's time for us to start thinking about where we're going to go on vacation this year. And so she's got that social calendar going, and is oftentimes the one that makes that connection with the outside, that brings the friends.
When we celebrated my husband's birthday, his 60th birthday, I rented out a space, and my husband loves poetry, so I invited everybody to bring a poem. And it was really great because these people showed up and wrote original poems or shared a poem about birds or nature or something that he was into. And it was very fun and funny. And at that birthday party, my husband said, I'm turning 60, and I want to say I'm grateful for you all to be here, but I am pledging today, moving forward, to follow, he calls me Daddy, to follow in Daddy's footsteps and pursue relationships with my friends. So you all are going to be hearing from me on a regular basis. And he has done that. He's almost 65. He'll be 64 next month. And for the last 4 years of his life, it has been really beautiful to watch him nurture those relationships.
That's special. That's wonderful.
It really is.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, another one had popped up. Widowed female seniors outnumber widowed males by more than 4 to 1.
True.
True. And in my, I'm talking to you from St. Petersburg, Florida. Part of the year I'm here, part of the year I'm up in Saratoga Springs. And in Florida, it's actually quite a bit higher than 4 to 1. True or false? Widows feel less secure about financial matters after the death of their spouse.
True.
Yeah,
True.
that's definitely true. And we saw that loud and clear in the research that we did. As I was looking at these numbers up here, I thought there's one other one. It's a good one. That 80%, like I've got it up here, that 80% of women are going to be single at death. That same 80% of men are married when they die.
Mhm.
Wow.
Okay, I want to talk about the 3 stages of widowhood. And I found these stages with all the widows that I worked with, and I've had other planners who said, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've got a widow I'm working with right now, and she's at stage 1 or stage 2. So 3 stages of widowhood. There's the taking care of me time, there's time to take care of business, and there's a time to take care of more. So that first stage is the very deep grief, almost numb phase. Many widows refer to this as a time that they have jello brain, that they just can't think very clearly. I felt it, and even though, you know, I'm a fairly smart woman, I got a Ph.D., I'm trained as a financial planner. After my husband died, in the first few days, I started freaking about, oh my gosh, am I going to be okay? His Social Security, that's stopping. His pension amount, I'm going to continue to get that, but it's going to be a lot less. And what about my business that I had done together with him? I wasn't sure if I could do that business a lot on my own. Well, this is a time when she should just be doing financial triage kinds of activities. She's highly vulnerable. There shouldn't be any big irrevocable decisions made at this time. There will be some decisions, like, yes, of course, the memorial service or funeral and collecting death benefits, but no big decisions like where to invest insurance proceeds right away. And just focusing on immediate needs, like looking and, you know, taking a look at, like, what are the sources of income coming in? What are the bills that have to be paid? All those kinds of things. And it's there's a free booklet that's available on my website, and Bernadette, you may have even sent out a link, I'm not sure, on this, but if people go to my website, they can download this Financial Steps for Recent Widows, which is actually a subsection of my book, but they can download that for free.
Yeah, I will share that link on the chat.
Yeah. And the yoga term that I put down here is breathe. And by the way, I did recommend yoga for a lot of my widowed clients, and many of them did it. I started yoga very shortly after my husband died. I had wanted to begin it before then, and he always said, oh, but we walk together, you get exercise that way, you're busy with other things, and I just never did it. But after he was gone, I started yoga, and I still do yoga today. All right, so that's the first stage. The second stage.
Kathleen, I'll just say we had a woman last week on our Navigating Change series. She is a 20-year plus yoga instructor who on, it's called The Change Point, and the importance that not just the physical aspects of yoga, but the way that it shapes and forms your brain and your decision making. So anyhow, I just thought that was great. That
yeah, it's good, a good fit.
Yeah.
The second phase, that's when, like, the jello brain is not there. She's past that. She can think more clearly. So I've said cognitive functions normalized, and most of the final steps that are in that little booklet that I've told you about will be completed, or nearly all completed. There's things there like you know, settling the estate and things like that. All right, so then some very basic estate planning things can be happening, including investments. And some of the investments that were appropriate for her as a married woman may not be a good fit with being a widow. And so estate planning, there will be updating the will, the trust, because probably her husband was named as the executor. And of course, he's gone now. And so changes will need to be made there. And there'll be pre or post retirement decisions, depending on if she's still working or if she's retired already. If she's retired already, for example, like when to start Social Security, if that hasn't happened already. And it's a time of, using a yoga term, balance. And because I don't know, like, individual situations of people who might be listening right now, I can't tell you do this or do that, because each widow is going to be different depending on her situation. Now, a question usually comes up now, how long does it take to go from stage 1 to stage 2? It all depends. It depends on that widow. for example, and it may be like the circumstances of death that can impact. For example, I had one widowed client. I'd worked with her and her husband for many years. He took early retirement. He was ready to move into retirement. He retired at age 62. She loved what she did. She was an executive with the school system. And so they had decided together, working with me, that she would continue on full tilt on that. And he wanted to become a house husband, which he loved. He remodeled their house. He became a gourmet cook. He would send her off to work with her sack lunch and meet her at the door when she came home, and dinner all ready, house cleaned. It worked out great for them. So he was enjoying that for a couple of years. She was still going, and she gets a phone call at work Monday morning to get to the hospital as fast as possible. And she gets there and she finds out that she knew he was playing tennis that morning, doubles with friends. But what happened was, right on the court, he drops dead, massive heart attack. No signs ahead of time. You know, he's just dead. Totally unexpected. A few months later, another client of mine, her husband died, Bob and Dorothy, and I'd also worked with them for many, many years. They were a couple in their 80s, and both of them had said that Bob was really living on borrowed time. He had oxygen that he used, but he died quietly one night in his sleep. Now, it wasn't an unexpected death. That specific time that it happened wasn't planned, but they both knew that he was on countdown. He was in his late 80s. She was in her mid 80s. The first widow, whose husband just dropped dead on the tennis court, unexpected, it took her about a year to move from stage 1 to stage 2.
So that's a really good point, right, Kathleen, that everybody has, there's no script for this, because each person, based on their situation, is going to experience this differently.
Yeah. That second widow, let's see, something happened here. I lost my second stage. The second widow, she moved from stage 1 to stage 2 in about 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
Even though older woman, but different, totally different situation. And as I worked with clients, they could pretty much tell me, you know, as we walked through this diagram, they could tell me right where they were in that point. And in fact, Liz identified with me. You know, she said, I think I'm about ready to finish up with this first stage and to move into stage 2, Kathleen. All right, the third stage is taking care of more. And I like to call this grace, because I like alliteration. I like grief, growth, and grace, the G words. Some people prefer to call it transformation. This is a beautiful stage for widows. Now, do all widows get to this third stage? No, not all do. Some of them are very happy to stay in the second stage. It's a safe place to be. It's a comfortable place to be. It's a good spot. There are also some widows who never make it out of stage 1. And those are the ones that we would refer to as stuck in widowhood. You might have heard that term. And indeed, some of these widows, within a couple of years after the death of their husband, they die also. In fact, you've heard on the news, you may even know someone who, within a very short period of time, periodically we'll hear it on the nightly news, you know, some widow dies within hours of her husband death, even though there was nothing wrong with her. And it's referred to as death of a broken heart. That really is a medical condition.
Yeah.
Written up in the journals. It's cardiomyopathy, something like that. Not going to have a biology lesson, but it really is. It's not a heart attack. It has to do with an expansion of the heart and blockages, and it's death of a broken heart. If a widow makes it more than 2 years past the death of her husband, there's a strong probability that she'll continue on. My mom was one of these, joined at the hip with my dad. I mean, they just did everything together. She died less than 2 years after Dad did. All right, so back to stage 3, this transformation. For those who do go into that, it can be a whole new life that can evolve with repurposing, a sense of independence, might be new friendships, new hobbies, new traveling. There's oftentimes advanced planning, estate planning. Sometimes there's a family business involved. There could be philanthropy. And I used a process that we called redesign your life. There could be special family issues. There's legacy planning going on, and sharing values and aspirations for the next generation. And it's a time, the yoga term, of fulfillment. This takes a while to get to. I remember writing in my journal one morning, and I said, this was about 7 years out after Tom's death. And I said, I am so much more than a widow. I am an independent woman. I am me. And most widows do take a number of years to get to that third stage. No matter what stage a widow was at, though, in our research that we did, the feeling financially secure was the #1 focus that a widow felt.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about a role that people fill, or an identity. I'm a widow. And then you finally got to the point where you said, I'm more than that. And I think that for women in their prime, it is the prime time to say, I'm more than just a spouse, or I'm more than just a mother, or I'm more than just a nurse. Or it's this idea of the growth that you're talking about, the repurposing, the sense of seeing yourself in a greater wholeness outside of your identity. And I just think it's so beautiful the way you explained that. And to me, what you're saying applies specifically to widows in a way that I don't think anybody else has ever said it. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I'm glad it fits. All right, so what was the advice that I typically gave new widows who came to me? Biggest single piece of advice. In fact, one of the articles that's, I think it was maybe one of the first ones that was done. In fact, there's a whole, if you go to my website, there's like about 160 articles that I've either written or I've been interviewed and they've written about the ideas. And you can read a whole lot more, but it was one of those early on. And the journalist said, what's the #1 piece of advice you give to widows? And I said, don't rush. If there's anything that doesn't have to immediately get done, like decisions about the funeral, that has to get done right away. It's better just to wait. So for example, the proceeds come in from the life insurance that she's collected. Don't decide, okay, I'm going to invest it here, here, here. I'm going to pay off the mortgage. I'm going to do this. Just invest it, park it in a safe money market account, and decisions will be made later about that, but don't rush to make decisions. Second one is watch out for financial wolves. And they are out there and they prey on widows. In fact, when I was just early on in the business, I can remember attending it was a professional meeting, but as I'm thinking right now, these folks really weren't professionals. And at another table, we were networking, they were talking about how we were identifying new potential clients to work with us. And I could hear the fellow saying, yep, I have my secretary go through the obits every morning. And we cold call the widows because they've got new money coming in through annuities or insurance, and they don't know what to do with it. And we don't sign everybody up, but we get a lot of clients that way. So it's a matter of watching out for, there are financial salespeople out there, and there's a difference between a financial sales person and a true fiduciary who's working with, but that's beyond really the scope of what we're going to do here. But just be careful. House decisions. This is a biggie. Would have some widows who'd say, I just can't stand to stay in this house anymore. There's just so many memories. I walk into the living room and there's that big blue chair where Bob used to fall asleep every night. And I know he's not going to be there anymore. And I just can't stand it. So I just want to get out of this house. Or son or daughter may swoop in and say, Mom, you can't take care of this place anymore. Come and live with us. And I've got situations where that has happened to a couple of my clients. The woman thought it would be wonderful to go and live with her son in Texas. She lived in Florida, go live with her son in Texas. And that's what her plan was going to be. And I said, from what you've told me, I thought you and your daughter-in-law didn't get along very well. And she said, oh, but they've talked, everything's going to be all right. But as we chatted some more about this possibility, she finally agreed, yes, okay, she would slow the process down. She would wait a little bit. Well, that turned out to be a pretty good, I said, do you have any friends in Texas? No, didn't know anybody. What about your church? Do you have a church connection there? No, didn't have any connection there. What about your medical providers? No. So she decided she would slow things down. She wouldn't go right away. Well, that turned out to be a good move because her son, who was in Texas, didn't stay in Texas very long. He got a job in Silicon Valley in California and moved yet again. So had she traipsed along with them, she would have had, she's grief from loss of her husband, but also grief of loss of place and loss of friends. There are other women who say, I'm just gonna hunker right down in my house, and they cocoon. And that actually was me. This was the house that my husband and I had planned together. We built it together. My business was actually in the house.
Kathleen, how long were you single after the death of your husband?
He died in 2007 in the spring, and I remarried in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was 11 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Definitely didn't rush into it.
Yeah. Another thing with the house, sometimes they'll say, well, this insurance money comes in, I just want to pay off the mortgage. And then I don't have that payment to make. It's just so I just want to pay that down. That may or may not be the right decision, because there could be like, how else should that money be used rather than just paying down the mortgage? I had one gal that she put the money aside, and then there were lots of medical related bills that came in that were not necessarily covered. And so she had other expenses to take care of. So don't run away from the house too quickly. Don't pay down the mortgage too quickly. There will come a point where it's really time to get serious about the investments, where the money's located, a review of everything. And this is where I encourage widows to think about talking with a professional to get another opinion, reading some more about ideas. But for example, decisions about investments, where the money should be situated, when to start Social Security. There oftentimes are decisions like if she is retiring, if what's going to happen with the pension. There are insurance questions. There are estate planning questions. There's all those comprehensive kinds of things. But there's a time for that, which is not at the very beginning of her widowhood. There's another purse, but it's a reminder to not be a purse for other people. It could be children. It could be a potential suitor. It could be others that come to her. And several of my widowed clients, it was like mom was an easy touch. There was one son who mom had been remarried, and they had a good marriage. And when her husband died, the stepson came forward and wanted his inheritance. Well, that's not the way her husband had planned things. He had left things to take care of his wife, and that stepson was going to get things after she was gone, but not right away. And so we had to have a meeting with stepson, mom, myself, the estate planning attorney, and show the son why he was not going to get a big chunk of change right now. And he still was upset, and he left the meeting saying, well, if dad was still around, he'd have given me money to buy that car. And if it's a potential suitor, they may be considering a prenuptial agreement. There's an article, I think, yes, I just put it on my website. It's one of the recent articles. It came out, it was in 60 and Me, and it was like things to consider before remarriage.
I just put that up. I just put it in the chat.
Okay, so it's don't be a purse, don't be a nurse. And I had one wonderful widowed client. Her name was Grace Mirth. That was her real name. She was in her 90s, and she advised me, she said, honey, you don't want to be a purse, you don't want to be a nurse, and you don't want to be their mother. There's some people that just want you to be their mother. So look out for that. And then the ABCs for widows. A is always ask questions when you're looking at potential uses or investments for your money. Why is that a good investment for me? What are my alternatives? What are the fees? What are the expenses? What is the commission that you're making off this? And I've had some clients who said, well, that wouldn't be very polite to ask those questions. Yes, it's your money. You've got the right to ask those questions. B is buyer beware. If it looks too good, it probably is. I would have widows would come in with a Sunday paper and it showed CD rates. Remember back in the days when CDs used to pay rates? Now they don't pay hardly anything. But there would be, it looked like it was a CD and it was paying like 8-9%, but it didn't say FDIC insured at the bottom. But she wanted to put her money there because that sounded so good. I said, well, if it's one of these things that looks too good to be true. So we made a phone call and we asked questions about it and saying, yes, it paid 8% for the first week. And then after that, it went down to 0.08%. And the money was going to be locked in for 30 years before she would be able to get it out. So wrong decision. And C stands for use some of her money for self-care. And it might be to get a manicure or a pedicure, to go for a walk in the woods where she's got to pay an entry fee to get into the park. Or maybe it's to buy a pretty new blouse that makes her feel better, to take care of herself. And I used to say in the workshops that I did, or to get a massage. With COVID, that may or may not be a good option right now, depending on where you live. They have opened up the facilities here in Florida. I still haven't started getting massages again, but that has to do with touch, and touch is very important. After my husband died, I mean, I was aware that he touched me a lot during the day, but I didn't know how much I missed that physical touch. So, and in this last year, a lot of us have missed the physical touch just because we've been not able to do it.
My mother said the exact same thing and started getting regular massages after my dad passed away.
So I would advise, back in the day when I worked with my clients, I said, get massages, get your hair done more often, get them fixing here, get your nails done. So and that's good touch. All right, I've got a number of free tools. We haven't got, I think there's just a couple more slides. Free tools that are on my website, and the website is Kathleen Rehl, it's just my name.com, and you'll find a number of things. You can some of them you can download, some of them you can look down online. They're out there. Love never dies. I will always love my late husband. I will. But I also love my new husband. So I consider myself pretty lucky. I get to love two men. And this is a special picture that was taken on our wedding day. And the pastor in the back who is performing the service is actually my stepson.
Oh.
Pretty neat. And that's another reason that I waited as long as I did. Charlie and I were together for almost 10 years. And we have a blended family, and I wanted to bring everybody together, and so that everybody was happy about the situation. In fact, they were the ones that were like, when are you two going to get married? Isn't it about time you're going to get married?
That's beautiful.
That's the cover of my book, Financial Guidebook for Widows. It's available at Amazon.
And it's 80 pages. It's not a difficult read. It's a workbook. I really recommend even if you're not a widow, if you want to be prepared to be a successful widow and spend less time in stage one, get Kathleen's book.
the way we've got time, I think, to tell the story of how the book came about. My husband was a pastor. He was a spiritual man. And
To get your whole picture, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing so we can see you full screen. But before that,
oh,
one more slide.
yes, I do. Next week, we're going to do a very different kind of a session than this, about how to write your personal legacy letter for family and friends. It's a highly, it's interactive, and you will leave the session with at least a first draft of a one-page letter for your family and friends. We did one just yesterday, and people are amazed. They said, oh my gosh, I never thought I could do this. But I'm going to talk about several ways of writing it, and there's one specific one that we'll use, and we'll do that together.
And I would just tell Lois and Cynthia that what I like about this is, and why we put it under Women, Wine, and Financial Freedom, is that most of the people we have on our program are talking about estate planning and your physical assets. Kathleen is talking a little bit about that today, but she has developed a whole technique of helping women to archive not just their physical assets, but their emotional assets, that which they will lead to their children and to their loved ones on an emotional plane. So I'm so grateful for that. And I'm really looking forward to next week.
And most people have said, oh, this is a whole lot more fun than it was to work on that trust.
Oh, well, that's good to know. So we'll make sure that we get that part out there. It's not only good for you, it's fun.
Yes, yeah. So Tom was older than I, and we both knew that he probably was going to pass sooner than me, but not that soon. He ran circles around me. He had so much energy, but he was diagnosed with incurable, unoperable cancer in December. It was start of that month. We've just been through a good holiday, Thanksgiving, and everything's fine. And he's got cancer, and he died 2 days before Valentine's Day. So I had a couple of months with him before he passed. And it was about a month before he died. And he said to me that it was his time to go, that he had accomplished everything he had in this lifetime. It was time for him to go. But it wasn't time for me yet. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, because you've got more work to do. In fact, for you to achieve your life purpose, I have to go. He said, what the blankety blank are you talking about? He said, I don't know what that purpose is going to be, but you'll figure it out. Okay. So a month after he died, and before he died, I said to him, you've got to send me a sign after you go. And he said, well, I don't know if I can do that or not. And I said, you've got to do it. And he wound up, he sent me many signs, which I chronicled, but again, that's beyond the scope of our session here. But after he passed, I continued to talk with him in my head. We had a beautiful house that overlooked huge Lake Tony, and there was a swing in the backyard. And he and I used to sit there and have profound conversations. But I sat there, it was about a month after he was gone, and I could hear him talking to me. And he said, I got it. I got the job. And I said, well, that's great. What job did you get? He said, I'm your chief guardian angel. And I said, oh, that's great. He said, but wait, there's more. As your chief guardian angel, I'm on a committee. And he knew I understood the committee structure because I chaired a lot of doctoral dissertation committees. And he said, there's this committee, and God is the chair of this committee. And as your chief guardian angel, I'm on the committee, and there are a lot of other people. Some of them you know already, but there are others that are going to be coming into your life this year that are going to be new to you. And we've been charged. We've got one task. We have 1 year to accomplish this. This committee started the day that my cancer was diagnosed. That was in December. He said, by the December of the end of this year, which would be 2007, you will know what your life purpose is. Great. Okay. I didn't know what he was talking about, but slowly over time that year, things started happening and some people did start coming into my life. And I kid you not, by December of that year, I knew I was to help widows, was to focus my business on helping widows, and I was to write a book. Now, I didn't have a clue how in the world I was going to write this book, but that's what I started 2008 doing.
And
And
I would say you've sold over 75,000 copies of that book.
Yeah.
So I think your husband was a darn good guardian angel.
Yeah, the book came out in 2010. And there were times that I said, okay, where are we going today with this? And the connections, the book shepherd that came through, the beautiful artist who gave me the paintings for the book. I wanted it to have original art, to be beautiful, just like a woman is beautiful, a widow is beautiful. And I was about halfway through and I'm thinking, okay, I got to get this thing published. I wonder how I'm going to do that. So I started talking to some publishers and they said, well, no, you're talking about a book that's maybe only 80 pages long. It's got to be, a book has to be longer than that. No, I don't want to overwhelm a widow. You're doing it all in color. That's going to be way too expensive. We'll do a black and white and we'll spot color here and there. No, it's got to all be black and no black and white, just colored. We're not sure we like your title, Moving Forward on Your Own, a financial guide for, well, I've taken it through focus, like a focus group, through several focus groups, and this is going to be the title. So I was just hearing, no, doors closed, doors closed. And I said, well, guess got to do it a different way. So then I learned about independent publishing or self-publishing and decided to go the independent publishing route. Fast forward, and it came, and I found a book shepherd. I found a interior designer of the book. I used to think interior design was what I did with my living room. No, it's how the inside of the book is laid out. The editor, they were all around, the printer, they were all around the United States. So got the team together. The book came out 2010, right before it was printed. I found out it was going to be even more expensive than I thought to print. I wasn't sure I really wanted to do it. My stepson said, take part of the money out of Dad's retirement fund. It's part of his legacy. You've been working on this so long, print it. My book shepherd, who coordinated all this, said, Kathleen, just trust me, this is going to go. The first month that it came out, the United States Army bought 1,000 copies. I had printed 1,500. They bought 1,000 copies.
Right.
And it just continued that way. And for professionals, it was written as a gift book because most widows are not going to walk into Barnes and Nobles, which doesn't really exist anymore, but back then it did, and say, I think I need to get me a book about money here. No, it was going to be given to them by their hospice worker, by their pastor, by their financial advisor, by their CP.
What year was the book published?
2010.
2010.
And we've done some slight revisions along the way. It's an evergreen book. It's the topics don't change that are in it.
Right.
And then in 2018, we made the switch for most of the books to be, it's print on demand now, which works out really well. So it's only available through Amazon. But I had, 2 weeks ago, I had another order for 2,000 books from a major financial firm that wanted to use it because they give it to their many advisors who work with many widows. So it's still going strong.
Well, Kathleen, that is such a great story. And, you know, it seems to me that you are not only helping widows, but you're inspiring all women to follow their dream, to find their purpose, and to move forward with it. So that's just so great. I wanted to, I think you covered most of the information that I was going to ask in the questions, because that was such a great PowerPoint presentation. But I did want to see if Cynthia or Lois wanted to ask you questions, either share what's going on in their lives, or just ask general questions, or maybe tell us why you decided to join us tonight.
Well, I've been a widow since 2006. I'm always interested in just finding out new things. And even though I've been a widow for a long time, more information never hurts, no matter how long you've, been by yourself. I pretty much, planned ahead. My husband was sick for like 5 years, so I planned ahead, and I kind of went a little faster through your steps than maybe a lot of people did, because my dad died when I was very young, and my mother knew absolutely nothing. And I decided that that was never going to be me. So I've always been a person who sort of, plans ahead. I had some surprises along the way, but I felt pretty confident that, I could figure this out. And every day I'm still figuring it out. So, overall, and I enjoyed your presentation very much. It was very helpful. As I say, I always like to learn new things, and it's always good to have somebody else's perspective on things too. So I thank you.
So Cynthia, was there anything new that, what was the thing that you will take away from this presentation? What struck you the most?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I can really answer that. I'm just, I'm kind of going through all of it in my mind as we're, as it's going on here, but I did enjoy it very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You were wise to plan ahead.
Absolutely.
Very wise. I still remember there was a meeting that I went to. It was a foundation, community foundation luncheon. And they were bringing people together that had remembered the community foundation in their estate plan. And I was sitting at a table. There were 2 couples and me, a single. And it was shortly after the book had been published, and the Tampa Tribune had done a wonderful Sunday. I mean, half the page was on the book and about how I wrote the book and widows and so on. So one of the ladies, the wives, is looking at me. She's looking at me. She's looking at me, and she says, "Oh, I know you. You're that lady who was in the paper last Sunday. You're that widow lady that wrote the book about widows." She said, "But I'm never going to need to read your book." Okay. Just because Harry and I have an arrangement, don't we, Harry? And she looks over at Harry. She said, "I get to die first." She said, "He knows all the money stuff, and that's boring. And sometimes he says, we've got to talk about this stuff. You need to learn about it." And I said, "Oh, I'm taking the grandchildren to the park, or I'm making a cake," or she said, "It's just boring to me." So he does such a good job. He takes such good care of me. So I get to die first. And I'm looking at Harry, and he looks about 10 years older than she is. He's got a walker. And I'm thinking to myself, guess who's going to die first?
Right.
Harry's going to die, and then she's going to be in double jeopardy. She's going to be in that massive grief up front, that jello brain, and she won't have a clue about the money.
Right. Women don't do themselves they do themselves a great disservice by thinking that that's not their territory. That women need to know everything that men know. I just can't, as I say, my mom knew absolutely nothing. I don't think the woman had ever written out a check in her life. And so, I watched her and I was only 13 when my dad died. And I remember thinking at the time that was never going to be me, and it wasn't.
Our speaker last week, Cynthia, is a financial planner.
She's my financial planner.
Oh, okay. Yes. She shared a little bit of that story, which I thought was interesting.
Right. Yeah. Karen.
Yeah.
Karen. Yeah.
That's great.
I like her.
Actually,
Go ahead, Lois.
I actually have the opposite. My husband didn't care about finances. I had to force him once a year to look at the chart that I made out. Here's where our money is. Here's the account numbers. I moved this to this. We decided to do, yeah. And he passed 4 years ago, last week, actually. He would have been in much dire straits than I mean, I tried to educate him as much as he wanted, but he was an artist and he didn't care. So anyway, so I really appreciate what my big takeaway is. I want to buy several copies of this because I think it would be a wonderful gift to other women who find themselves suddenly single.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lois, I think I agree with you. And I think my big takeaway was, first of all, I was shocked when Kathleen said that 80% of women will die single, and while 80% of men are married when they pass.
Mhm.
And that discrepancy is like, shoot, I think almost every woman should buy Kathleen's book. The other thing, I really liked your ABCs and the questions that you talked about, always ask questions, buyer beware, and the importance of care, self-care. So
Right.
I appreciate you saying that, Kathleen. That's one of the things I really took to heart.
And we couldn't do it here, obviously, but when I would do these workshops in person, I would talk about chocolate. The chocolate was good, and we would pass chocolate around. So I'm going to pass virtual chocolate to y'all. And they're really, if you
For
Google,
self-care.
Google the health benefits of chocolate, it is absolutely amazing. It's just, and I drink chocolate, chocolate cocoa, but I eat a piece of chocolate every night. And oh, if you go to my website, you'll see a link to my Facebook page. And I just put it up yesterday. It's the best chocolate cake I've ever made. It's a bundt cake, but it's a healthy cake. It's got honey in it, whole grain, zucchini is in it, and it's double chocolate, and it is so moist and so good.
Probably doesn't even need icing, right?
The recipe calls for an icing on it, but I don't put it on.
Yeah, that sounds moist.
Yeah. So C is for chocolate too. And Lois, when you were talking about that you were the one that managed it, I'm thinking back, like the clergy clients that I worked with, oftentimes it was the wife who knew that she had to pay attention to this, and she was dragging her pastor husband in. The pastor husband is like, why are we even here? The Lord is going to take care of everything. We're just going to be fine. And the husband and the wife was saying, right, the Lord has given us a good financial planner to work with. We have got to get our ducks in order if we're going to retire on time. It was the wife that recognized we got to pay attention to the money issue.
I feel like in many, many ways, I'm kind of a blend of the woman who's like, that's not my cup of tea, and somebody who's very particular. We raised 5 children, put them all through school, and I paid all the bills for all those years. When my husband was in private practice, I paid the people who worked for him. I did all our monthly bills, did the regular, always down to the penny. I was good with that. But I have not really been schooled myself in our investment end of things. And we do have an investment advisor, and we have a very, I think, safe retirement plan. But am I knowledgeable about that? Not the way I hear you talking, Kathleen. You all are inspiring me. Okay, folks. Well, if we were not going to have any other questions, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I encourage you all to join us back next week when Kathleen does her legacy letters. It promises not only to be informative, it promises to be tons of fun. Kathleen, you're a great presenter, and I cannot wait till next week.
Thank you very much.
And how about, Bernadette, if I send you that graphic from the legacy letter, because you might be able to use that.
That would be perfect. That would be great.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.